Hello and welcome back. Now I'm delighted to welcome JoAnn Stonier, who's the Chief Data Officer at Mastercard. She'll be presenting on Is Data the New Currency? JoAnn is a data expert and strategist with substantial experience building a data strategy and management program, including curation, governance, analytics, quality, and sourcing of data. Welcome to the stage, JoAnn. Whilst we just get JoAnn connected.
There we go.
Hello and welcome.
Hello.
The stage is yours.
Okay, I think you can hear me. Hold on one second. Let's get my presentation going.
Fantastic.
Okay, can you see the presentation now?
It's just coming through. Let's just give it a second or two. Where are you beaming in from today?
I'm in New York, just outside of New York. So hopefully you can see the presentation. Let me know.
Yeah, just waiting for that to come through. Well, good mid-morning to you in New York this morning.
Thank you.
Awfully grey this afternoon in London, so I've got my lighting on now.
Okay.
Okay, let's just see if we can get that share screen working.
Okay, I'm coming back.
To have you.
I'm coming back. Here we go. Let's try one more time.
That's okay.
I keep trying to share, but it doesn't seem to. Okay, how about now?
There we go. You're great to go.
Okay, so
Fabulous.
let's start here, shall we? So good morning or good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm just, I'm thrilled that all the technology is working well because it was, we weren't quite sure it was all going to be a go, and especially watching Grady in the last session, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. So is data the new currency? I think everybody knows the answer to that. What I'm going to focus on today is a little bit about harnessing the value of the data and what we're seeing in this very new world that we're all encountering given COVID-19. And I'm going to piggyback on some of the issues that we've heard from some of the previous speakers this morning. I think we've had some absolutely fantastic speakers all talking about so many new tools and techniques. I've been taking fantastic notes, knowing how I'm going to be trying to apply some of the key learnings of this morning's sessions to some of the work that we do at Mastercard. But, you know, when we look at what's been going on in the world, right, I really work at the intersection of our business innovation, the technology implications, and really the data implications of where do we need to go next. And COVID really has had, as we all know, an incredible global impact. And as a result, it has created new data challenges and opportunities that I think all of us as professionals need to recognize as we take all of our work forward and the work that we've had in progress, but maybe more importantly, as we begin to try to recognize that it will take all of us as professionals to really solve these issues and move forward in a new way, as it requires greater competencies and greater cooperation across fields and in industry that we maybe didn't think of before everything really changed in 2020. And so when you think about it, COVID really has spawned more than just a health crisis. It's an economic crisis, and it has multiple different types of social crises that are just beginning to emerge. And for us as data professionals, we are seeing that in how all of us need more data and how our customers, our clients are using new varieties of data. They're asking for new types of data. They want new volumes of data. They want new sources of data, all at increased speed. And we've talked today all about AI and how AI can help with some of that. But to a certain extent, and I'll talk about it today, that if we don't have the right governance of our data, if we don't have the right data sharing methods, and if we don't really understand how AI and machine learning is structured, and I really, really liked one of Grady Booth's quotes this morning, mindfulness of a mindless system. I think we need to recognize that we will not get the outputs that we need to solve some of the issues that we really all need to cooperate to solve. And so as a result, we need to use all of the solutions that we've been creating in progress to create even newer solutions that begin to work together in harmony. So data sharing really is an enablement of collaboration. And like many of you, as the world shifted in the springtime, what we found happening over and over again, and Mastercard has been leading in really sharing our data, especially for social impact and for economic sustainability and scalability. We recognized as we began working with so many of our customers that so many of them were trying to understand not only the health issues related to COVID, but increasingly the revenue and expense management issues, the impact on the shift from commerce in general to more e-commerce and social commerce, as well as begin to do market and demand planning as markets began to shut down and then ultimately reopen at a much slower pace than they had ever seen before. And in order to really enable this type of analysis and to help our customers and clients, which include banks, include other types of financial institutions, and also include our wide range of merchants across different industries, it also includes governments that asked us for assistance. As we looked at the wave of information, we recognized that we needed to really have a methodology, a governance model around our data sharing. Now we had this model that I have up on the screen for quite a while, and we had been using this for data for social impact as we used our data to answer key questions for society. But we found ourselves using this model over and over again as we spoke to customers to make sure they understood how to use not only their data, but to also understand how to combine data, get data sets ready, and to make sure they had the right kinds of data quality controls and access controls as they began to think through how is their information going to be useful as they tried to answer those key questions. And so when we talk about this, what we also found is that we had a number of organizations, and some of you may work for them, who are now trying to understand how to do data analytics. And so many of the speakers are doing such sophisticated things with data. But many, many organizations we found were still trying to figure out the basic questions. And in our organization, we already knew what data was available for use. We also understood what our data was good at, right? But when we were getting inquiries from so many different angles, including could we assist with things like contact tracing, we had to understand what is our data really fit for? Will it assist the inquiry? What was the quality of our data for a million of the inquiries we were getting in the spring? And we also had to, as some of the speakers have talked about when it comes to machine learning and AI, but even for the most basic analytics, we had to understand, was there going to be bias in our data sets, even as we provided insights to answer different questions that perhaps we hadn't been asked to use our data for in the past. So, for example, there was one idea early on during the COVID crisis where we were asked by a number of governments, could we use card transactions and not the actual information that's on the card, and which is actually quite limited, which is really the date, time, place, and amount of the transaction and the card number. But really, the whole idea that a card had been present someplace to assist governments with contact tracing to know that an individual had been present somewhere where the virus had been. And we really thought long and hard about it, but we realized that our data, while we could use that information, it would have to be done in tandem with other information. And was there going to be enough commonality, right, in how those data sets could be combined to actually provide the lift in the inquiry? And we actually explored it quite heavily with a whole consortium of companies. But what that made us realize that our data or the insights that would come from our data would have to go to some type of recipient organization, in this case, a government organization that was performing the research, and that they were struggling even to define the project and inquiry. They weren't sure what data to ask for. They weren't sure how to really think through the usage of the data, how it would be shared, how it would be stored or accessed. These are kind of like what we call the Mastercard mom and apple pie issues that we had been very good at when we were talking one-to-one with an organization. But when you begin to combine data sets from so many different organizations, the issues just begin to multiply. And we realized that the world, our world of even very sophisticated data companies, companies. We're not ready with an ecosystem that enables data sharing quickly and easily in order to answer questions of urgent matter. And so I put this slide together just because I think all of us need to take the step back with all of the tools that we're developing. I listened to the presentation on unstructured data and structured data. I listened to Grady's presentation on AI and hybrid AI. And all of these things I think are so interesting, but yet if we don't really begin to understand, if we can't share information, we're still going to be limited in our inquiry. We actually built a governance process that we actually ramped up very quickly to make sure that we could begin to share insights and understand it very fast so that we could actually change things and participate in this whole idea of data as a currency, but data as the fuel to answer key questions of new inquiry in partnership with others. And I'll leave this slide at a high level, but really understanding the data partners, the scope of the work, making sure we reviewed it to understand the data requirements, the security privacy issues for sure, as well as a protocol of how the data would be used by analysts and scientists in a sandbox environment usually, where we would be mostly under control for our data as it was being manipulated, and then the insights derived therein would be how it would be used further in the next level of inquiry, as well as what were the impacts going to be and how is this information ultimately going to be published and used. So if you think about it, we now have the opportunity to begin to build out an ecosystem related to data providers and recipient organizations, but there's a whole host of types of ecosystem enablers with skills and platforms, right, to scale the use of data, what we call for social good or impact, or for multiple inquiry, as well as to assist the beneficiaries, which is really most of us in society, as we try to really answer some of these key questions. And of course, there are gaps. And I'll leave you with this thought. As much as we have so many enablers, data science expertise, secure technology platforms, the legal skills to negotiate disputes and contractual language, and we can build the facilities to share data in a secure way, we still don't necessarily have this at the ready. We can do it one-on-one or one to a few, but when we want to do one to many or many to many, this gets very, very complicated very, very quickly. And are we sure that we understand the ethical use of data to make sure we understand who's benefiting and what will the ultimate use of the information be? At Mastercard, we often ground our inquiry in something called our data responsibility program. And these are a set of principles that we've derived in order to make sure that we know how we are thinking through all of our innovation. And it really is grounded on making sure we recognize that all data ultimately has impacts on people, and that individuals, of course, should own their own personal data. They should be able to control it and benefit from it, and we should protect it. And it starts with security and privacy, being accountable for all data use, being transparent about how we use the data, offering individuals control, making sure there's integrity in our data processes, but also recognizing we are going to use it for innovation and we are going to use it for social impact. And so what we've started to do in tandem with other companies is create common best practices, codes of conduct, standard legal agreements, identify common fiduciary responsibilities, common methodologies for sharing, as well as assessment tools and data protocols over access, retention by data class. I'm going to move quickly here because I know I'm going to run out of time, but all of this also has an impact on AI and machine learning. We have to also put this whole idea of responsible use and data sharing into the context of AI and machine learning. And we know that there are benefits and risks to using AI, but we also need to be pushing forward in this responsible use of information in the AI context. We've developed a governance model for artificial intelligence, similar to the one that I just showed for data sharing. And this also has to be really understood, that we must understand the purpose of the AI, and we must do a data evaluation. Some of the steps that many of the speakers have talked through have kind of jumped over this process. But if we don't understand what is going on with the data that's going into the machine, and how we are learning and how the machine is learning, and we talked a lot this morning about how the machine learns, we know that the data risk of bias in the data or incorrect information will just be amplified in how the learnings are created and how the learnings will be applied. We know that there are potential risks in how the data is prepared, how the machine actually uses the analytics, and how the actual AI will be applied to any given situation. We must have the right oversight. We must have the human ability to direct the AI. And again, other presentations have spoken about this quite eloquently this morning. When we talk about responsible AI and best practices, we really do need to kind of go through a thorough remediation process. You need to understand how your data was actually obtained. You have to understand how the data was generated and actually do the bias remediation on that information. You need to frame the business problem or problem you are actually trying to solve, and don't just define model outcomes. Define a concept of fairness as you create that model, because oftentimes, depending upon how we define a model outcome, we can have confirmation bias right in how we're defining that outcome. You need to conduct exploratory data analysis. You need to train on instrumental variables wherever possible, run simultations ahead of production deployment, add weights to features. We heard about noise in one of the earlier conversations, right, to control drift. Refit your models often. Learn from what you're doing. And deploy observational AI to make sure you're understanding what is actual results versus what is bias information or incorrect information. Make sure you have strong data management and taxonomy. That's a given. Guard against security vulnerabilities, and continuous education for all of us, our data scientists, as well as your data designers and use case designers, so that they also can constantly help refine the methodologies and the governance so that you can continuously refine your own organization's principles. So I'm available too, if you want to get in touch with me to talk about these issues, because I think they're the equally important issues for us to solve as a community of data professionals. I think we've talked before about needing ethical codes of conduct for data professionals. And I think as the world has evolved with COVID, it's ever more important that we begin to address these issues around data sharing, issues around data governance, issues around ethical AI, to make sure that responsible organizations understand the impact of what we're creating as we try to solve world problems that are so pressing. Thank you so much.
JoAnn, thank you so much. And in particular, thank you so much for so eloquently tying up a lot of the narrative of the conversations and presentations we've had today. I think that really enriched your presentation. I'm hoping you're sticking around for some questions with our lovely audience. Is that right?
Sure. Yes.
Fantastic. Yes. So our team is going to drop a link into the session chat, so you can click through to the lounge for networking for the Q&A room with JoAnn. Thank you so much. She'll be able to read out your questions. We also have in the cyberspace area, where KPMG have also begun another of their interactive Q&A sessions, so do check that out. And now for our final session of the day, please welcome to the stage Fabrizio Silvestri, who's the research scientist at Facebook AI, who'll present on how decoding strategies affect the verifiability of generated text. Fabrizio, welcome. We'll just connect him. There we go. So at the moment, we've got a couple of sessions going on. And don't forget, you can network by joining our WhatsApp group. If you click through to the networking page, there is a QR code that you can scan, with your phone or click through the link and you can connect with our fellow attendees. We're really encouraging a new way of networking on our platform. It's something that we've listened to from you guys, the community. And we'd love to hear your feedback of how that network is going. I'm really enjoying the chat in the WhatsApp group. People are already talking about sharing resources and notes that they've taken to share the whole collaborative mindset with our wonderful audience that we've assembled from around the world. Thank you as well for all of your tweets. We're going to be back after a short break where Fabrizio will join us. So bear with us and we'll be back after a very short break.